in Mauritania, people memorize the entire Quran without ever looking at a mushaf. Ever. And that's the way they memorize it, to this day. And we were there just recently, and Shaykh Khatri was teaching a child, the Quran, and he recites it, and the child writes it down on the lawh. And so there was somebody there, an Englishman, who just said, SubhanAllah, you don't ever look at a mushaf? And he said, Abadan. He said, most people here don't even have masahif. You know, the people that memorize the Quran in Mauritania in the desert, they literally don't even have a mushaf. And I once, there was a man there that I spent some time with who literally, he just recites Quran all day long and a good part of the night. That's just what he does, all the time. And I asked him if he ever looked at the mushaf, and he said a few times. Even though it's actually better to read the Quran from the mushaf by Sharia. It's actually more virtuous to read it from the mushaf than it is to read it from memory. Unless you're doing qiyam al-layl. But normally, because they're considered the eye and the hand share in the ibadah. But the point being is that the Quran is still transmitted, and it's one of the ways of talqeen, which is called talqeen shafawi, which is the oral transmission of the Quran. And that's the way it's been transmitted for 1400 years without any mistakes. So for the first 100 years, this is the way seerah was being transmitted, and this is the way hadiths were being transmitted. The sheikh would literally sit and he would tell the story from memory. And if you've been around people that have phenomenal memories, you'll appreciate this. If you haven't, it's a little difficult to relate to that. But I have actually met people that memorize entire books by heart, several books, not just one. And I actually met a man who memorized the entire Qamus and Muhit of Fairuz Abadi, which is about probably about 4,000 or 5,000 pages, small print. And he just memorized it by heart. You know, his name was Da'dud. He's a famous scholar in Mauritania. So he can just, you know, you say a word, and he'll, you know, give you the direct quote from them. And one of the sheikhs, Muhammad al-Khadir, I think it's Muhammad al-Khadir, went to, he was asked by the Basha of Egypt to go to Turkey and to get, because the best copy of the Qamus was in Turkey, and to go and transcribe it for him and do muqabala of it and everything. So after a few months, he came back. And he said, where's the book? And he said, bring some scribes. And so he brought the scribes, and he just dictated the book by heart. He'd just gone there, memorized it, and came back. And another story, Muhammad Salim, I think, who was another Mauritanian, was once in Mali, and two Bambara people started arguing in front of him, and one killed the other. And when the police came, they asked what happened, and he said, I don't know, but bring somebody that knows their language. And so they brought somebody, and he said, and then he just quoted it. He didn't know what it meant. And then he said, and then he said, and he quoted it, he didn't know what it meant, and went back and forth until the man determined what actually had happened. And that's a true story. It's not like a made-up story. So there are people in our tradition, and not just Muslims, I mean non-Muslims, there have been non-Muslims that have these type memories where they can literally just memorize everything that they hear. And I know that there's a woman in Sadika whose husband was Muhammad Ahid, I think, who died not that long ago. And Muhammad Ahid said that he never heard anything or read anything except that he remembered it, ever. And so there's people that Allah gives that gift to. The early community had that. And so what that meant is that they did not need, they were actually, the person was more reliable than the book. That's what's extraordinary if you think about that. The person was more reliable than the book. And what the ulama said is that the knowledge in the Salaf was in their breast. In other words, wherever they went, it was with them. And Imam Shafi'i says, my knowledge is in my breast, it's not in a chest back at home. So if I go to the marketplace, it's with me. And if I go to the masjid, it's with me. Wherever I go, my knowledge is with me. It's not like a chest of books. And also Imam al-Ghazali, radiallahu anhu, he spent 2 years transcribing his several books from a library in Samarkand. And on his way back, some brigands robbed their caravan, and they were taking all these books that he just spent 2 years writing down. And he said to the chief of the brigands, please just don't take my knowledge. It's of no benefit to you. And the brigand laughed. And he said, what kind of knowledge is it that the likes of me can steal it from you? And he said, Imam al-Ghazali said, he realized that Allah had made him say that to him to let him know that if you didn't memorize it, it wasn't, it was something you could lose any time. And he said after that, he memorized everything that he studied. So this was how the early community was. So they said that in the beginning, their knowledge was in the breast, and they transmitted it to people that way. And then they said, but later it went from the breast to the books. But the ulama became the keys through which the books could be unlocked for the students. In other words, now knowledge is in the books. It's no longer carried around by people. But the person who studies the